This time last year, Andy Dalton and the Bengals were 0-2, and he had yet to throw a touchdown. Now he's thrown 6 through 2 weeks, and if you have him in fantasy, he's been worth 43 points, even though he was the 25th quarterback off the board in ESPN leagues. Jonathan Vilma's made his way in here, so let's talk about it here. I can't believe I'm about to ask you this question, Louis Riddick. But the Steelers and Browns tied. The Bengals just swatted the Ravens.
Yeah.
Is Cincinnati the best team in that division?
The thing I will say about the Bengals is this. Don't pay attention to what they do in the regular season. We all know that this is a team that a lot of times will set people up and look great during the regular season. Then once they get to the postseason, they lay an egg and they can't really duplicate their performance during the regular season.
But we would never have foreseen them being in the playoffs.
But I will say this, though. Look, for years, and even when I was back in scouting, people have said 1 through 53. And I used to say 1 through 53, this roster is as talented as any. Look at some of the players that they have. Look, it's not just the A.J. Green show on the offensive side of the ball. Tyler Boyd is a very good wide receiver. John Ross is a guy who they need to get going, who is super talented. Joe Mixon, there are people who believe Joe Mixon is just a notch below a guy like Todd Gurley in terms of height, weight, speed, versatility, run and catch, block in the backfield as far as pass protection. They have a lot of things going for them. On the defensive side, a lot of high draft picks, a lot of capital put into that front seven to rush the passer. It's just about these guys never seeming to be able to duplicate their performance once the playoffs start.
And you know, as we did the highlight, sorry, Jen, but as we did the highlight, I said the Ravens then woke up in the middle of the game. And Jonathan, let's talk about Thursday night road games. The numbers suggest that it is very difficult to go on the road on these Thursday nights. And the Ravens, they just looked like they weren't ready to play when the game started.
Yeah, Thursday night games are the worst. I've played in 4 of them. And defensively, forget just a team mentality. Going from that Sunday, you're sore, physically having to figure out how are you going to get yourself ready to play this game. And, oh, by the way, have a new game plan. Then you travel on Wednesday to get over there. It is tough. It is the worst. And I can feel the Ravens' pain. And, of course, they'll get back into it in the second half. But the first half, how do you get yourself motivated? And you could say, oh, you're a professional. You get paid. Well, yeah, I'm still hurting. I still have to go travel. I still have to figure out this game plan. And, oh, by the way, the other team is just as good and just as talented.
You watched the Ravens in that first half last night, and hashtag how bad must Buffalo be? By the way, the Ravens playing without their top corner, Jimmy Smith, suspended through week 4. And Baltimore allows a pair of touchdown passes outside the numbers, both to A.J. Green. They allowed 9 all last season against 10 picks on those kinds of plays. So clearly they miss Jimmy Smith. And let's just talk about the Ravens there. I'm not even kidding. They annihilate Buffalo, and you're thinking to yourself, wow, maybe the Ravens have a little something going with new weapons on the outside for Joe Flacco. It certainly didn't look that way last night.
Yeah, I think they still do have something going, but this is a team who last year in 2017 feasted off of the turnover differential being in their favor. And last night it wasn't. I believe they were -3 for the game last night, if I'm not mistaken. And look, you just referenced it. The fact that they weren't turning the ball over, they were allowing big plays outside the numbers, and then Joe's turning the ball over, and they're not getting consistent performance, and they're throwing timely interceptions that allow short fields to the Bengals and just kill all their momentum. They struggle anyway when they go to Cincinnati. I know I said this earlier, you have to play the perfect game sometimes, but there's definitely a formula when you're playing a divisional opponent on a short week on the road, and they blew that out of the water. They didn't execute any of it. So I don't think it's indicative of who they are in terms of how they looked against Cincinnati. I don't think it's indicative of who they are as far as how they blew out Buffalo. They're somewhere in between. The season is a grind. I don't like hearing players always just point to the fact that it's a long season, you're not going to play great, because sometimes that makes you believe that you're not really holding yourself accountable. It is 16 games, but it's only 16 games. So you don't have a whole lot to give away. Hold yourself accountable, raise your level of performance.
Yeah, and you always have to worry about what else is happening in the division, right? Because you can fall behind rather quickly. Obviously, it's Joe Flacco's team right now, but you've got Lamar Jackson there chomping at the bit. What did you think of the way they worked him in there, and is it detrimental to Flacco when Lamar gets in there for some of those snaps? I'm sure
Joe doesn't like it ever coming from under center and having to give away reps in live game action. I don't think that Lamar is going to be someone who they're going to replace Joe with. This team is set up this year to win with Joe relative to what they have brought in here. Meaning when you have guys like Willie Snead and John Brown, Michael Crabtree, and you draft Hayden Hurst, #1 out of South Carolina, the tight end, who's not on the field yet, you're telling your football team, as long as we have a proven, reliable signal caller, we can maybe do some things given the defense playing to their level that they didn't play to last night. Lamar is going to sit and wait. He needs the time. You can see that he needs the time. And that's not being disrespectful to him. He knows he needs the time. But whenever they take Joe from under center and they move him out to a wideout position or whatever and run their gadget package, I don't think any quarterback likes that. Troy Aikman kept talking about that on the broadcast last night. They don't like that.
How about as a defender, Vilma, when you see that, when those changes didn't look like it scared anybody or fooled anybody yesterday?
I would hate that. If I'm a defender, I'm going back to my Saints days. If I ever saw Sean Payton take Drew Brees out from under center to run a gimmick play when Drew Brees is going to give us 5 touchdowns, in my head, I'm saying, what are we doing? Are we really trying to win? So I don't like it, but I understand where they're going with it. Lamar Jackson's very dynamic, but you can't do that if you have someone that's humming. Now, the problem is Joe Flacco isn't humming.
Last night he wasn't.
Last night he wasn't.
Right.
So that's the problem. You try to kickstart that offense.
And how much of it do you think, I don't want to make it sound like I'm making excuses, but this Thursday night road thing, I think there is something to that. How much of that do you think was on display last night?
A lot of it was on display last night, especially defensively, as you mentioned, Lewis. Ravens' defense is not as bad as they showed yesterday. They are a very good defense, but they're tired. And I know we don't want to make excuses about the season. It's a long season, but it's really about how do you recover from that Sunday. They played well, et cetera, all that great stuff from the Bills, but then they have to go recover, also study film, and then get right back on a flight to go play again.
Well, John, I mean, you were the guy who made the calls your entire career. And when that captain, that general isn't there, and all of a sudden the communication becomes a little bit slower, or it's unsure, or there's any kind of thing that happens that where maybe a defensive back isn't playing to his help, he isn't getting the right kind of help because people aren't in the same position, or rather in the correct position.
Yep.
That leads to big plays that we can't really decipher why it happened when we're sitting there watching it, but I can guarantee you, with C.J. Mosley not being in there, things weren't running as smooth as they normally do. He can tell you. He used to run defenses. And when you miss a guy like that, it can take your performance and take you from here to here in a hurry. And when you're playing against A.J. Green and Tyler Boyd and those guys, you don't have any margin for error. I don't care if you want to bang on the Bengals or not for being inconsistent as far as playoff is concerned. These guys are good. And if you aren't on your P's and Q's, they will light you up just like they did last night.